The balloons were still floating outside the glass conference room when Mark delivered the news. Bright silver ones spelling out 10 years, bobbed against the window like cruel decorations at a funeral. I sat across from him and Nina from HR, watching his mouth move but barely processing the words. "Your position is being restructured," he said, voice flat and rehearsed. The timing felt deliberate, almost sadistic. 10 years of loyalty, and this was my reward. I felt numb at first, hollow. Then Mark leaned back with that smirk I'd come to hate. "You'll land somewhere smaller," he said, the condescension dripping from every syllable. Something inside me cracked. Not grief anymore, but something sharper. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered, "You just made a mistake." His smirk faltered for half a second before returning. He had no idea what those words meant. But he would. Soon enough, he would understand exactly what he'd done. I signed the termination papers with steady hands while my mind raced through possibilities, consequences, and a very quiet kind of rage. I spent that first night staring at the ceiling, replaying the decade I'd given them. The late nights when everyone else went home. The holidays I cancelled because the servers needed updates. The weekends I sacrificed debugging code that kept their entire infrastructure running. I'd built half their systems from scratch, written thousands of lines of code that held everything together like invisible scaffolding. Nobody else truly understood how it all worked. That was the problem, I realized. I'd made myself indispensable without making myself valued. I remembered my first day, fresh out of college with big dreams and bigger ideas. The company was smaller then, scrappier. They needed someone who could build systems that scaled, and I delivered beyond their wildest expectations. Each year, my responsibilities grew. Authentication protocols, database architecture, server automation, all of it bearing my fingerprints. But somewhere along the way, my contributions became expected rather than appreciated. Praise stopped. The raises became smaller. And I kept working anyway, believing loyalty mattered. Now, lying in the dark, I understood how naive that belief had been. Mark Ellison arrived 2 years ago like a storm nobody saw coming. He was charming at first, all smiles and compliments during his introduction. The board called him a fresh perspective for the tech division. I called him trouble the moment he took credit for my load balancing solution in his first executive meeting. He'd found my proposal in the shared drive and presented it as his own innovation. When I confronted him privately, he shrugged. "You're too quiet in meetings. Someone had to speak up." That became his pattern. He'd undermine me subtly, calling me the quiet one who just codes whenever executives asked questions. He'd reassign my projects midstream, claiming he was optimizing workflow. My role began shrinking while his authority expanded like a cancer. The worst part was how smoothly he operated. He never yelled or made scenes. Just slow, calculated moves that isolated me from decision-making while keeping me buried in technical work. I watched him consolidate power, and I said nothing. I kept my head down and kept coding, thinking competence would speak for itself. I was wrong. Competence without visibility is just free labor. The restructuring started 6 months before my firing. Mark announced it in an all-hands meeting, his voice full of corporate enthusiasm. "We're streamlining operations for maximum efficiency," he declared, pointing to a slide full of meaningless buzzwords. What he meant was consolidating power under himself. My team of 3 engineers was suddenly reporting directly to him instead of me. He called it removing unnecessary management layers. I called it what it was, a setup. He had me train my own replacements without explicitly saying that's what they were. I spent weeks walking them through systems I'd built, documenting processes, explaining the architecture. They were good kids, eager to learn. I liked them. That made it harder when I realized they were being groomed to make me redundant. The final insult came during a team celebration for a successful product launch. Mark stood up with a champagne glass and said, "Let's thank Ava for being absolutely irreplaceable." Everyone clapped. He was smiling. I knew then it was a lie that would haunt me later. You don't praise someone as irreplaceable unless you're planning to prove otherwise. The rumors started in the break room. Owen, one of the junior developers, pulled me aside one afternoon with worry in his eyes. People are saying Mark's bringing in someone from his old company, he whispered. To replace you. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces fit too perfectly. I scheduled a meeting with Nina in HR, keeping my voice calm and professional. She looked uncomfortable the entire time, choosing her words carefully. I can't discuss personnel decisions, she said officially. Then, dropping her voice, she added, but if I were you, I'd document everything. Watch your back. That conversation confirmed what I'd been denying. This wasn't incompetence or bad luck. Mark was building a case against me, manufacturing reasons to justify my removal. I started paying closer attention to emails, saving copies of every conversation, backing up my work to external drives. If he wanted a paper trail, I'd make sure mine was bulletproof. The paranoia felt exhausting but necessary. I'd been naive once. I wouldn't make that mistake again. The writing was on the wall, written in Mark's careful handwriting. The access restrictions started without warning. I logged in one morning to find half my system privileges revoked. Databases I'd built were suddenly locked. Server configurations I maintained daily were marked Administrator Access Only. I marched to Mark's office, forcing myself to stay calm. Why am I locked out of systems I created? Yes. He didn't even look up from his laptop. You don't need to worry about those anymore, he said casually, like we were discussing lunch plans. We're redistributing responsibilities. The smile on his face was practiced, hollow. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded and left, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. That afternoon, I opened my email to find an automated message. Thank you for 10 years of dedicated service. The system had sent it at exactly my hire anniversary, programmed years ago when anniversaries still meant something. The irony burned worse than any insult. Here I was, being systematically dismantled, and the company's automated systems were thanking me for my loyalty. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at that email, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. I spent my final weeks playing calm while my mind raced. Instead of fighting or pleading, I became methodical. I archived my work meticulously, organizing documentation into clear folders. To anyone watching, I looked like a model employee ensuring a smooth transition. But I was also taking notes. Which systems depended on which code? Who actually understood what? Which warnings I'd given that were ignored? I made copies of emails where I'd flagged critical maintenance issues, timestamped and saved. The funny thing about being the person who builds everything is you know where all the weak points are. You know which processes are fragile, which systems need constant attention, which shortcuts were taken against your advice. I wasn't planning sabotage. I was simply acknowledging reality. Then the recruiter's message arrived. Saw your open source contributions. Impressive work. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities at TechVista? TechVista was our competitor, smaller but growing fast. I stared at that message for an hour before responding. Yes, let's talk. That conversation changed everything. The exit interview was theater and we both knew it. Mark sat across from me wearing his sympathetic face, the one he practiced for difficult conversations. I hope there are no hard feelings, he said, extending his hand. I shook it firmly, matching his fake smile with one of my own. None at all, I replied, my voice steady. But my eyes were cold, and I saw him notice. He shifted uncomfortably, sensing something beneath my composure but unable to identify what. Before leaving, I pulled out a document I'd drafted years ago. It was buried in my original employment contract, a clause I'd insisted on when I started. Just a reminder, I said, sliding it across the table. My code license terms were never formally transferred to the company. Might want to have legal review that. His face went pale. What does that mean? I stood gathering my bag. It means you should read contracts more carefully. I walked out with my dignity intact and a quiet sense of power he couldn't comprehend yet. That clause gave me leverage he didn't know existed. And I intended to use it. For 3 weeks I disconnected completely. I hiked trails I'd been too busy to explore. I journaled pages of anger and relief. My best friend Lila listened to me vent over wine. Her eyes sympathetic. "He thinks I'll just fade away," I told her, voice bitter. "That I'll disappear quietly like I never mattered." She squeezed my hand. "Will you?" I smiled, and something in that smile made her lean back. "No. I'm planning something bigger." But I didn't tell her what. Not yet. I needed time to think, to let the dust settle, to see how things unfolded without me. The anger was still there, burning steady beneath my calm exterior, but it was controlled now, focused. Then, 3 weeks and 2 days after my termination, my phone buzzed with a message from Owen. "Hey, the system keeps crashing. Nobody knows why. Can you talk?" I stared at that message for a long time. The temptation to ignore it was strong, but curiosity won. "What's happening?" Type back. His response was immediate, panicked, and deeply satisfying. The server failures started small. Intermittent glitches that seemed random at first. Connection timeouts. Database queries taking too long. Nothing catastrophic, just annoying. Mark blamed the IT team, barking orders and demanding fixes. But the problems persisted. Owen sent me a screenshot late one night. It showed one of my old code comments, highlighted and circled. "If authentication module isn't updated by April 15th, cascading failures will occur in dependent systems." The date was 3 days ago. I'd written that warning 8 months earlier, flagging it as critical in 3 separate emails to Mark. He'd replied to exactly none of them. Now the system was doing exactly what I'd predicted. Not because I'd sabotaged anything. Because he'd ignored preventative maintenance. The crashes were getting worse. Customer complaints were flooding in. And the team had no idea how to fix it because they didn't understand the underlying architecture. They understood pieces, fragments. But the big picture, the way everything connected, that lived in my head. I tried to document it. But Mark kept deprioritizing those efforts. "Not urgent," he'd said. Now it was very urgent. I smiled in the darkness of my apartment, phone glowing in my hand. TechVista's office was everything my old company wasn't. Smaller, yes, but vibrant. People collaborated in open spaces. Ideas were debated, not hoarded. My new manager, Patricia, actually listened when I spoke. "We value expertise here," she said during my first week. "We want you to rebuild your confidence." I didn't badmouth my former employer. Didn't need to. But word traveled fast in tech circles. Patricia had heard rumors. "Sounds like they made a serious mistake," she said carefully. I just smiled. Meanwhile, messages from Owen kept arriving. "Server collapsed again yesterday. 4 hours of downtime. Mark is losing his mind. Emergency weekend work. Nobody can access the backup authentication keys. Mark mentioned your name in the meeting. Not kindly. Each message was a small vindication. I wasn't happy about my former colleagues suffering. Owen was a good kid. But Mark's panic. That felt like justice beginning to bloom. I was healing here, building something new. But behind me, in that glass tower I'd left, karma was doing its work without any help from me. Monday morning everything broke. I was sipping coffee at my new desk when Owen's message came through. "Emergency. Main server's completely down. Nothing works. Mark is freaking out." Then another message. "They can't reach your backup systems or authentication keys." He just said your name. Like 5 times. I set my coffee down carefully, heart racing. This was the big one. The cascade failure I'd warned about. The one Mark had been too arrogant to prevent. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Another voicemail. By noon I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails. One was from Mark himself. His voice trying for casual and failing completely. Hey, just wondering if you left any documentation about the server architecture. Call me back. Delete. One was from the IT director, apologetic and desperate. We're in crisis mode. Any help you could provide would be deeply appreciated. Delete. The last was from Nina in HR, her voice quiet. They're blaming legacy systems. But we both know the truth. Call me when you can. That one I saved. I didn't call anyone back. Not yet. Let them sit with it. Let them feel what happens when you underestimate people. Mark convened an emergency board meeting that afternoon. Owen sent me screenshots of the internal panic. Investors were furious. The company was losing millions every hour the system stayed down. Clients were threatening to leave. The stock price was dropping. In the boardroom, Mark tried to deflect. These legacy systems were poorly maintained, he told the board, according to Owen's account. The previous engineer left inadequate documentation, but the IT team had pulled logs. They showed Mark's authorization code overriding my maintenance requests. Dates, times, his digital signature approving delays on critical updates I'd flagged as urgent. One board member, an older woman who'd always been kind to me, apparently asked a devastating question. Why were these requests denied if they were marked critical? Mark stammered. Blamed budget constraints. Claimed he was following executive guidance. The logs told a different story. His signature alone had blocked the maintenance. No other approvals needed. He'd made unilateral decisions, and now those decisions were burning down everything around him. Owen's final message that night was simple. He's toast. Everyone knows. I closed my laptop and breathed deeply. The truth was surfacing without me saying a word. Mark called me directly the next morning. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice professionally pleasant. This is Ava. Hey! His fake cheerfulness was painfully obvious. How's the new job? Listen, quick question. Did you leave anything undocumented about the authentication system? Just want to make sure we have everything covered. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Everything was documented, Mark. You just never read it. His tone shifted, became harder. This isn't helpful. We're in a serious situation here. I'm aware. I warned you this would happen. Multiple times. In writing. Are you seriously going to hold a grudge while the company burns? His voice was rising now, desperation bleeding through. I'm not holding anything. I'm simply stating facts. You made decisions. Those decisions had consequences. Now you're experiencing them. Legal might need to get involved, he said, trying to sound threatening. I laughed. Actually laughed. Please do. I'd love for legal to review those emails where I flagged critical issues you ignored. And that contract clause about code ownership. Have fun with that. Hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From satisfaction. 10 minutes later my phone rang again. Nina from HR. This time I answered immediately. Nina's voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. I shouldn't be calling you. But you need to know what's happening. I leaned forward. I'm listening. Mark is blaming you in board meetings. Calling you disgruntled. Saying you sabotage systems before leaving. But the board is demanding proof. They're not buying it. I pause. If you have receipts, now's the time. My heart pounded. This was the moment. The choice between quiet satisfaction and active justice. I have emails, documentation, warnings I sent that were ignored, timestamps showing when I flagged issues and when he denied the fixes. Send them to the board. Directly. Not through Mark. Nina's voice was firm. They need to see the truth. I hesitated. Revenge felt good in theory, but this would make it real. Permanent. They'll destroy him, I said. He destroyed himself, Nina replied. You're just providing evidence. After we hung up, I sat at my laptop for an hour. The emails were organized, ready to send. All I had to do was click. My cursor hovered over the button. Then I remembered that smirk. You'll land somewhere smaller. I hit send. The email went to the entire board of directors with one line. Documentation you requested. Then I closed my laptop and waited. The internal investigation started within 24 hours. Owen kept me updated through a mixture of messages and hurried phone calls. They're going through everything, he said, voice awed. Server logs, email chains, maintenance requests. They found where Mark altered critical schedules without approval. Altered? Yes. He didn't just deny your requests. He went into the system and changed the maintenance windows you'd set up. Made them months later. His authorization code is all over the logs. Closed my eyes. I'd suspected incompetence. This was active sabotage of safety protocols. Why would he do that? Owen sighed. Budget. He wanted to show cost savings to the board. Delayed maintenance meant lower quarterly expenses. Made him look efficient. So he'd gambled with system stability to pad his performance metrics. And lost. Catastrophically. What happens now? Yes. The board requested a formal statement from you. Through lawyers. They want everything documented properly. This was bigger than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about corporate negligence, fiduciary responsibility, potential legal liability. I'd opened a door that couldn't be closed. And I wasn't sorry. The statement took me 3 days to write. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Victoria, helped me stay factual and unemotional. Just facts, she coached. Dates, times, actions. Let the evidence speak. I documented everything. Every warning I'd sent. Every maintenance request Mark denied or delayed. The authentication system risks I'd flagged. The backup procedures I'd recommended. The training sessions I'd requested for the team that were cancelled. I never insulted Mark. Never called him incompetent or malicious. Just presented the timeline, his decisions, and the predictable consequences. Victoria read it over and nodded approvingly. This is devastating precisely because it's calm. You're not emotional or vindictive. You're just correct. The board received my statement on a Friday morning. By Friday afternoon my phone rang. Board member calling. I answered with my heart hammering. Ms. Carter, this is Rebecca Chen from the board. The kind woman who'd questioned Mark. Your documentation was extremely thorough. And troubling. Thank you for reviewing it, I said carefully. We'd like to discuss something with you. Would you consider consulting with us to repair the systems? I sat down slowly. They wanted me back. Not as an employee. As their savior. Walking back into that building felt surreal. The same glass doors. The same marble lobby. But everything had shifted. Employees whispered when I passed. Some smiled sympathetically. Others looked away, embarrassed. Mark was nowhere to be seen. He'd been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation's conclusion. I was escorted to a conference room where the IT team waited. Owen stood when I entered, relief flooding his face. Thank God, he breathed. The others looked exhausted, defeated. I spent 6 hours that day walking them through the systems, showing them what had broken and why, explaining the architecture they'd never fully understood. They listened intently, taking notes, asking smart questions. Why didn't anyone teach us this before? One young developer asked. I tried, I said simply. Those training sessions were cancelled. Budget constraints. They exchanged looks. They were beginning to understand what had really happened here. I wasn't just fixing code. I was revealing a pattern of negligence that had endangered everything. By evening we'd restored basic functionality. The servers were stable. Clients could access their accounts. The bleeding had stopped. But the damage to the company's reputation would take much longer to heal. While restoring the systems, I discovered something else. Something worse. The maintenance budget Mark had cut hadn't just disappeared. I found authorization codes for purchases that made no sense. Expensive software licenses the team didn't use. Consulting fees to a company that didn't seem to exist. I documented it quietly, taking screenshots, noting dates. Then I requested a meeting with Nina. There's something you need to see, I told her, sliding a folder across her desk. She opened it, her face going pale as she read. Oh God! He was embezzling. I can't say that definitively. But funds meant for system maintenance were redirected to purchases I can't verify. The board should investigate. Nina closed the folder carefully, her hands shaking. This is beyond my authority. This goes straight to the CFO and legal. He nodded. I figured. But I had to report it. As I left her office, I felt no satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. I'd come back to fix the systems. Instead, I'd uncovered something that would change everything. The scope kept expanding, and Mark's house of cards kept collapsing under the weight of his own choices. The board meeting happened 3 days later. I wasn't present, but Owen filled me in afterward. They brought everything, he said, voice awed. Your emails, the audit trail, the embezzlement evidence. Mark tried to deny it, but his voice was shaking. What did he say? Owen shook his head. That you were disgruntled. That you'd manipulated the evidence. That this was revenge. And the board didn't believe him. Not with his authorization codes all over everything. Not with the financial irregularities. Not with the timeline matching your warnings perfectly. Mark had been suspended immediately. Full investigation pending. If the embezzlement was confirmed, criminal charges would follow. I sat with that information, feeling strange. I'd wanted him held accountable. But this went so far beyond what I'd imagined. His career wasn't just damaged. It was obliterated. And I'd been the catalyst. Did I do the right thing? I asked Owen quietly. He looked at me seriously. You told the truth. What happened after that was on him, not you. Maybe he was right. Maybe I could believe that eventually. For now I just felt tired. And oddly free. The story broke publicly on a Tuesday morning. Tech company VP suspended over financial mismanagement and system collapse. The article detailed everything. The server failures. The ignored warnings. The financial irregularities. My name was mentioned as the engineer who'd tried to prevent it. My phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues reaching out. Reporters requesting interviews. LinkedIn connection requests by the hundreds. Owen sent me a screenshot of the internal Slack channel. Everyone's celebrating quietly. They're calling you a hero. I didn't feel like a hero. Heroes don't watch people's lives implode, even when those people deserve consequences. But I'd learned something important. Truth has its own momentum. Once you set it in motion, it rolls forward regardless of your feelings. Patricia called me into her office that afternoon. The board from your old company contacted us. They want to offer you something. Waited. Director of Engineering. Mark's old position. Full autonomy. Significant raise. They want you to rebuild the culture there. I sat back stunned. Return to the place that had fired me. Take the position of the man who'd destroyed me. Felt like justice and trap simultaneously. Almost said no. The idea of returning to that building, those people, those memories, it felt like backsliding. Like accepting their apology meant accepting what they'd done. But then I thought about Owen. About the other developers who'd been caught in Mark's dysfunction. About the systems I'd built that deserved proper care. I wasn't going back for them. I was going back for my legacy. For the work I'd invested years creating. For the standards I wanted to set. Called Rebecca Chin. I'll accept on several conditions. Name them, she said immediately. First, I want complete authority over technical decisions. No overrides from executives without board approval. Agreed. Second, mandatory training programs. No more knowledge silos. Everyone learns the full system. Agreed. Third, transparent maintenance budgets. No cutting corners for performance metrics. Agreed. I took a deep breath. And fourth, I want Mark's actions documented in company policy as a case study. What not to do. Make sure this never happens again. Silence. Then, That's unusual. That's my price. Agreed. When can you start? Smiled. 2 weeks. I'm finishing my projects here first. Professionally. The irony wasn't lost on me. The company that had fired me was now begging me back on my terms. Mark showed up to clear his desk on my 3rd day back. Security escorted him, a requirement during his suspension. He looked smaller somehow. The arrogance gone, replaced by something hollow. Our eyes met across the office. He stopped. You must be happy, he said, voice bitter. I considered him calmly. No, I'm not happy about any of this. You destroyed me. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for your mistakes. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Maybe something in my tone finally broke through. Maybe he actually heard me for the first time. I recommended you for promotion once, I said quietly. Told the board you had leadership potential. Did you know that? He blinked, surprised. Before you took credit for my work. Before you cut maintenance budgets. Before you made me irreplaceable, then fired me. I believed in you once. His face crumpled slightly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But you did mean to take credit. Mean to undermine me. Mean to fire me after 10 years. You just didn't mean to face consequences. I turned away. I hope you learn from this. For your own sake. I walked away without looking back. The final power shift. Not revenge. Not even justice, really. Just truth finally being acknowledged. 6 months later, the office felt different. I'd rebuilt the team with people who valued collaboration over competition. Owen was now a team lead, mentoring new hires. We'd implemented transparent code reviews, paired programming and knowledge-sharing sessions. No more silos. No more single points of failure. The systems ran smoothly. Client satisfaction was up. The company's reputation was slowly recovering. And I'd instituted something new. A monthly forum where engineers could flag concerns directly to leadership. No more ignored warnings. No more documentation that disappeared into the void. Every critical issue got addressed or formally declined with written justification. Mark's case study was now part of new employee orientation. A cautionary tale about ego, short-term thinking, and the danger of underestimating quiet competence. Some people thought it was harsh. I thought it was necessary. On my desk sat my 10-year anniversary plaque. Kept it. But I'd added my own engraving underneath the company's generic message. Loyalty deserves respect, not exploitation. It was a reminder. Not of bitterness, but of boundaries. Of knowing my worth. Of never again mistaking patience for weakness. And one. Not by revenge, but by rebuilding. By setting standards. By proving that competence and ethics could coexist. That was the real victory. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. If I could have handled things differently. But then I'd remember that smirk. You'll land somewhere smaller. And I'd remember every ignored email, every denied request, every time I'd been called the quiet one like it was an insult. I'd done nothing wrong. I documented risks, followed protocol, worked myself into exhaustion for a company that saw me as disposable. Mark had fired me thinking I was powerless. He learned too late that knowledge is power. That the person who builds the foundation can recognize when it's about to crumble. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped preventing the natural consequences of his choices. The difference mattered. I was at peace now. Leading a team that respected me. Building systems that would outlast us all. Mentoring people who would carry these lessons forward. My phone buzzed. Owen, sending a meme about legacy code. Smiled. This was what work should feel like. Collaborative. Respectful. Sustainable. 10 years ago, I'd walked into that building with dreams and determination. Now I walked in with wisdom and boundaries. Both versions of me mattered. Both versions built something that lasted. That was justice. Not revenge. Just the simple, profound act of knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less.